Now reporting, David Muir.
Good evening. We're coming back on the air at this hour because there's been a development in the search for Nancy Guthrie, the 84-year-old mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie.
One of the characters on Mindhunter, Dr. Wendy Carr, that was the character's name, was actually developed based on Dr. Ann Burgess. So it's a real privilege to get to talk to her. And she had such interesting insight when it comes to the Nancy Guthrie case, what she thinks the motive may be, why she thinks it may have something to do with retribution, and why she believes the FBI should be looking back at Nancy's associates going back a decade or more. There's a lot that I hadn't thought about before.
Before we get into this case, take a second to subscribe to the channel. One now.
Two federal agents walked up the driveway of Annie Guthrie's home in a gray SUV. They did not stay long. They went inside wearing gloves. When they came back out, they were still wearing those gloves, and one of them carried a brown evidence bag. Before leaving, they stopped at the mailbox and carefully removed the mail, again without touching anything directly. That detail matters. When investigators handle mail with gloves, it usually means one thing. They are looking for trace evidence, fingerprints, DNA, fibers, something small that could answer a larger question. As of that date, Nancy Guthrie had been missing for more than 2 months, 84 years old, taken from a secured home, no confirmed suspect, no confirmed sighting, only fragments of time. And one of those fragments still anchors everything. 2:28 a.m. on February 1st. That is when her pacemaker stopped transmitting. For weeks, much of the public discussion centered on visible things. The front door camera, the masked figure, the open back door. But investigators appeared to be shifting their attention towards something less visible. The digital silence that occurred in the exact same window. Because Nancy did not simply disappear. The house went quiet first. Around 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera was physically removed. Shortly after that, parts of the home network experienced interruptions. Then at 2:28 a.m., her pacemaker signal stopped uploading. At first glance, those could seem like separate events. A camera removed, a device losing signal. But federal investigators are now examining whether they were connected by something more deliberate, possibly a signal disruption device. If that theory proves correct, it changes the nature of this case. It would mean that whoever entered that home did not rely on luck. They relied on preparation. Recent search activity in the foothills suggests that investigators are looking beyond the property line. Ground teams have been conducting methodical searches along desert washes and secondary roads behind the Guthrie residence. These are not casual sweeps. They are targeted. One location, roughly 4 to 5 miles from the home, drew particular attention. It sits behind natural rock formations, partially shielded from aerial view. According to field reporting, agents use specialized equipment, including ground-penetrating radar, to examine the area more closely. What they reportedly found were not random desert objects. Pieces of black tactical tape, a hiking boot, soil that appeared intentionally disturbed rather than naturally eroded. None of these items have been publicly confirmed as directly linked to Nancy. That distinction is important. But their presence in a concealed wash, not visible from the road, raises a quiet question. Why hide something there at all? Experienced search personnel know the difference between trash blown in by wind and material placed with intent. Disturbed soil patterns can indicate burial, removal, or staging. Tactical tape is not unusual in isolation, but in the context of a suspected abduction, it becomes more relevant. If someone discarded items in that wash, it suggests planning beyond the home itself. There is also the matter of vantage point. From portions of that hillside, investigators noted a clear line of sight toward the Guthrie property. That does not prove surveillance occurred, but it does establish that surveillance was possible. And that possibility reframes the timeline. If someone had been observing the property for days or weeks, they would have known camera placement. They would have known lighting patterns. They would have known when movement inside the home slowed. The idea that this was spontaneous becomes harder to sustain under that lens. At the same time, federal technicians are reportedly analyzing a recovered electronic device believed to be capable of interfering with Wi-Fi and cellular signals. Such devices are illegal to operate in the United States, but they do exist on black markets and specialty online forums. If a jammer was used, it would explain the synchronized disruption. Cameras unable to upload, medical devices unable to transmit. Home networks dropping at the exact moment silence was needed. But silence leaves traces too. Advanced jammers often contain internal components with serial identifiers. Even if outer casings are removed, circuit boards sometimes carry manufacturer markings. Cyber units within the FBI specialize in extracting those markers. That is where the case may quietly turn. Inside the Guthrie home, investigators reportedly collected mixed DNA samples. Mixed DNA is complicated. It means more than one contributor. It requires separation before comparison. It slows analysis. But items found outside the home, if they were worn or handled closely, might contain clearer contact DNA, the lining of a boot, the adhesive edge of tape, sweat or skin cells that are less contaminated. Those samples, if viable, could be entered into national databases. And if they do not match existing profiles, they can be sent down a different path. Investigative genetic genealogy. That process does not look for the suspect directly. It looks for distant relatives and public family tree databases. From there, genealogists build outward, narrowing possible identities through age, location, and connection. It is not fast, but it is persistent. Meanwhile, law enforcement agencies involved in this case are navigating public scrutiny. Early hours matter in any abduction investigation. There are questions about whether the initial response focused too heavily on one theory before fully securing digital evidence. Those questions are not accusations. They are reflections of process. And process matters here because the suspect, if there is one, appears to have used a brief window of engineered silence. Approximately 25 minutes passed between the camera removal and the final pacemaker transmission. 25 minutes in a quiet neighborhood. 25 minutes without digital alarms. 25 minutes that may have changed everything. There are also ransom notes. Some sent not to police but to media outlets. Some claiming Nancy is alive. Others claiming she is not. Payment demands fluctuating dramatically. That inconsistency may suggest deception. It may suggest opportunism. Or it may suggest psychological manipulation designed to redirect attention. Investigators now face two tracks, one physical, one digital. The physical track runs through desert washes, discarded materials, soil samples, and boot prints. The digital track runs through Wi-Fi interruptions, device pings, cellular data gaps, and DNA databases. For older viewers who have watched cases unfold over decades, one truth is familiar. Major investigations rarely break in a single dramatic moment. They break in quiet layers. Right now, the desert has offered fragments. A glove worn to collect mail, a boot in a wash, tape pressed into soil, a network that went silent at 2:28 a.m. None of these alone solve the case, but together they outline something that does not feel accidental. As the sun sets over the Catalina Foothills each evening, the terrain looks peaceful again. Saguaro stands still. The wind moves through dry brush. It does not look like a crime scene, but somewhere within that landscape, a decision was made on February 1st, and investigators are slowly walking backward through it. This is not yet a breakthrough, but it may be the first time the silence itself is being examined as evidence. In the weeks after the desert search intensified, investigators began turning their attention towards something far less dramatic than radar scans or desert washes. Receipts, because if the items found in the foothills were placed there intentionally, they had to come from somewhere. One detail that quietly shifted the tone of the investigation was the brand of the hiking boot reportedly recovered in the wash. It was not rare, it was not specialty, it was not custom. It was common, an Ozark Trail hiking boot. a brand widely sold in large retail stores, especially Walmart. Affordable, mass-produced, sold in high volume. At first glance, that seems like a disadvantage. When thousands of identical products are sold each week, how do you trace one pair? But that is precisely what investigators are exploring. If someone planned this carefully, they may have selected mass-market items on purpose. A disposable kit, boots, tactical tape, possibly a backpack, items that would blend in, impossible to trace by appearance alone. That suggests logistics, and logistics require timing. Reports indicate that federal agents have requested transaction data from multiple Walmart locations in the Tucson area, particularly stores within driving distance of the Catalina Foothills. The goal is not to accuse customers. The goal is to narrow patterns. Did someone purchase a cluster of outdoor items together within days of February 1st? Boots, tape, gloves, possibly a signal device component. If so, was it paid for with cash, a prepaid card, cryptocurrency tied to online ordering, or a standard debit card that left a digital trail? Mind the suspect, if there is one, may have tried to erase personal identity from the tools used. But commerce leaves records. Even when identities are hidden, timestamps remain. Time is one of the few things that cannot be deleted, and that brings investigators back again to the early morning hours of February 1st. At approximately 1:47 a.m., the doorbell device at the front of the Guthrie home was removed. 8 minutes later, motion activity was detected elsewhere on the property. Then at 2:28 a.m., the pacemaker transmission stopped. Those numbers are not dramatic. They are steady, precise, sequential, which raises another possibility. Was the figure seen at the front door the primary entry point? Or was it a diversion? Some investigators have privately considered whether the front door activity may have been designed to draw focus, while the actual entry occurred elsewhere, possibly through the back, where a flower pot was reportedly found propping a door slightly open. A simple tactic, but effective. If the network was disabled during that window, neighbors would not receive alerts, cameras would not upload footage, medical devices would not transmit signals, a temporary blind zone. And that blind zone is central to the signal jammer theory. Federal cyber specialists are now analyzing the internal components of the recovered device, believed to be capable of interfering with Wi-Fi and cellular frequencies. These devices vary widely. Some are crude and ineffective, others are sophisticated. The sophistication matters. If the device was custom-built, it implies technical skill. If it was commercially acquired, investigators can trace the manufacturing origin. Circuit boards often carry microstamps, even when outer casings are removed. Even silence has fingerprints. Residents in the broader Catalina Foothills neighborhood have reported that some smart devices experienced brief connectivity disruptions that same night. That has not been officially confirmed as linked. But investigators are analyzing regional tower data to determine whether unusual signal interference occurred. If multiple homes experienced micro outages, it suggests the blackout was not isolated, it was environmental. At the same time, ransom messages have complicated the picture. In early April, new communications surfaced, not directed to law enforcement, but to media outlets. One message claimed Nancy was deceased. Another claimed she'd been transported south into Sonora, Mexico. The demands fluctuated dramatically, from millions of dollars initially to tens of thousands, then lower. That inconsistency raises concerns. If these messages are genuine, why the contradictions? If they are not, who benefits from inserting confusion? Investigators are considering the possibility of psychological manipulation, a tactic designed to split focus, to pull attention toward border crossings, away from local terrain. The Tucson region includes vast desert washes that extend toward remote roadways. Former tactical officers familiar with the area note that certain routes can be navigated quietly, particularly at night, without drawing attention from primary checkpoints. But here is the critical distinction. There have been no confirmed phone pings. No confirmed surveillance hits at border crossings, no license plate reader data publicly tying the case to Mexico, which means the cross-border theory remains just that, a theory. Meanwhile, back inside Pima County's investigative framework, internal questions continue. It has been acknowledged that the initial on-scene supervisor had not previously led a homicide investigation. That detail does not assign blame, but it does explain why early assumptions may have shaped early actions. In cases involving digital disruption, immediate preservation of router logs, network activity, and cloud backups is essential. Even minutes matter. If the digital aspect was not recognized immediately, the suspect may have gained additional time to erase residual traces. And yet, even with those challenges, the evidence is beginning to layer. Desert fragments, retail tracking, circuit board analysis, DNA separation, investigative genetic genealogy. Experts in that field, including specialists who have solved decades-old cases, emphasize patience. When DNA does not match criminal databases, genealogical databases can sometimes identify distant relatives, third or fourth cousins, narrowing identity through family trees. It is methodical work, not dramatic, but effective. The unknown DNA recovered inside the Guthrie home reportedly remains mixed, requiring advanced separation techniques. However, if DNA from external items, boots, tape, discarded material, proves cleaner, it could accelerate identification. And that possibility introduces pressure on the suspect, if one exists. Pressure within agencies coordinating across federal and local lines. Pressure from a community watching closely. There is also a human dimension that must not be lost in the analysis. Savannah Guthrie returned to national television during this period, speaking publicly about her mother. Her presence reminded viewers that this case is not just a puzzle of timestamps and terrain. It is a family waiting. For older viewers especially, that dimension resonates. The vulnerability of aging, the expectation of safety within one's own home, the idea that someone might have studied routines, camera angles, and neighborhood patterns quietly over time. If surveillance occurred from that hillside vantage point, it suggests familiarity, not randomness, which brings investigators back to a steady conclusion. This does not look impulsive. It looks rehearsed, but rehearsals leave patterns leave data, and data, when layered carefully, begins to narrow possibilities. As of April 8, 2026, there is still no named suspect, but the scope of the investigation has shifted. It is no longer only about what happened inside that house. It is about where the equipment came from, how the silence was engineered, who had both terrain knowledge and technical understanding, and whether biology, in the form of DNA, will quietly expose what cameras could not capture. As the investigation moves forward, the loudest elements of the case, the desert searches, the signal device, the ransom notes, are beginning to give way to something quieter: biology. Inside the Guthrie home, investigators collected multiple DNA samples. Some were described as mixed profiles, meaning more than one person's genetic material was present. That is not unusual in a lived-in home. Family members, visitors, service workers all leave traces over time. The challenge is not finding DNA. The challenge is isolating the right DNA. When a sample contains multiple contributors, forensic scientists must separate those strands carefully before comparison. It is delicate work. It takes time. And sometimes the smallest contributor, perhaps only 10% of a mixture, is the one investigators are most interested in. And that may be where the case now stands. Because even if the digital footprint was erased, and even if the suspect wore gloves, avoided cameras, and disrupted signals, human biology does not vanish so easily. Skin cells transfer, sweat transfers, microscopic fragments remain behind. Investigators are reportedly focusing on whether items recovered outside the home, particularly the hiking boot and strips of tactical tape, may contain clearer genetic material. Items worn tightly against the body can retain contact DNA in seams, stitching, or adhesive edges. If a usable profile is developed, it would first be entered into CODIS, the National Criminal DNA Database. If there is no match, the case moves into a different phase. Investigative genetic genealogy. This process does not search for the suspect directly. Instead, it searches for relatives who may have voluntarily uploaded their DNA to public ancestry databases, a distant cousin, a shared great-grandparent. From there, genealogists construct family trees. They narrow by geography, they narrow by age, they narrow by proximity to the crime scene. It is not dramatic work, it is patient work. Experts in this field have solved cases that sat dormant for decades, but they caution that the timeline is unpredictable. Weeks, months, sometimes longer. In the Nancy Guthrie investigation, time feels heavier because alongside forensic patients, there are institutional realities. Early decisions matter. In the first 48 hours of any disappearance, the direction chosen can shape everything that follows. There have been public acknowledgments that the initial on-scene leadership lacked extensive homicide experience. That is not an indictment. It is context. If early hours lean toward one theory, such as voluntary wandering, certain forms of evidence may not have been prioritized immediately. Outdoor scenes change quickly. Desert terrain shifts with wind and heat. Digital logs overwrite themselves if not preserved. Those first minutes after 1:47 a.m. and 2:28 a.m. may hold answers that are now harder to retrieve. And yet, not impossible, because even erased systems leave faint shadows. Cyber teams continue analyzing network activity around the time of the blackout. They are examining whether the suspected signal device emitted a unique signature before activation. Even brief emissions can be logged by nearby infrastructure. If that data exists, it may pinpoint range, strength, even approximate location. At the same time, transaction reviews continue quietly in the background. If the retail kit theory proves accurate, and if purchases were made in proximity to the disappearance, investigators may be able to cross-reference timestamps with surveillance footage inside those stores. Retail cameras often retain video longer than expected. A purchase made days before February 1st might show a face, a gait, a distinctive movement. And that possibility introduces a subtle shift in tone. Because if investigators identify a purchaser, they move from anonymous theory to named individual. Pressure increases when identity narrows. Publicly, law enforcement remains measured. They do not confirm every recovered item. They do not verify every rumor. And that restraint frustrates some viewers, but it also suggests that certain details are being protected intentionally. The ransom messages, for example, continue to complicate perception. Conflicting claims about Nancy's status, alive or deceased, create emotional turbulence. Demands for payment directed toward media outlets rather than directly to family or investigators raise questions about authenticity. If the sender is genuine, they risk exposure by communicating at all. If the sender is not genuine, they exploit tragedy for attention or reward money. Either way, investigators must treat each message seriously until proven otherwise. There is also the cross-border theory. Sonora, Mexico, has been mentioned in communications. Former tactical officers familiar with the region acknowledge that certain desert routes allow movement outside primary checkpoints. But without confirmed phone pings, vehicle detections, or border surveillance hits, that possibility remains speculative. Speculation can distract, which is why federal focus appears to be returning inward toward the original silence, 25 minutes, from the removal of the camera to the final pacemaker signal. In that window, something happened. Either Nancy left the home voluntarily, which current evidence does not strongly support, or someone engineered a controlled environment in which alarms could not function. If it was engineered, that suggests rehearsal. Rehearsal suggests proximity. Proximity suggests familiarity. And familiarity narrows the field. But for older viewers who have watched similar cases unfold over decades, the pattern may feel recognizable. Early confusion, expanding search zones, public appeals, then a quieter phase where laboratories, not helicopters, carry the weight. That is where this case appears to be moving, not towards spectacle, toward analysis. As of now, there is still no confirmed suspect. There is still no confirmed location of Nancy Guthrie. But the narrative has shifted from random disappearance to possible tactical operation, from visible intrusion to digital suppression, from scattered clues to layered data. Every piece recovered from the desert, the boot, the tape, the disturbed soil, represents an attempt to turn silence into substance. And every DNA strand being separated in a laboratory represents patience. Mirror cases rarely break all at once. They break when pressure intersects with identification. If genetic genealogy produces a name, investigators will verify quietly. They will compare additional samples. They will confirm timelines. Only then will public announcements come. Until that moment, the desert remains outwardly calm. The Catalina Foothills still look peaceful at dusk. But beneath that stillness, records are being analyzed, circuits are being traced, family trees are being mapped, and somewhere within those quiet processes, an answer may already be forming. For now, the case stands at a careful edge. No dramatic declarations, no confirmed closure. Only the steady work of people who believe that even engineered silence can eventually speak. And for those watching, especially those who understand how long justice can take, the most honest position may be this: hope, grounded in evidence, patience, grounded in process, and a commitment not to let the story fade until the truth, wherever it leads, is fully known.